much done?
Yeah, I think I got the hang of it.
Jack Hall is in Antarctica with his two friends, Frank and Jason, for scientific research. They are surrounded by ice on all sides. They are here to collect samples of ice from deep below the surface, for which they have to dig through the surface. As they are digging, suddenly the ice under Jason's feet collapses, creating a huge crack that is several miles long and very deep. They barely manage to save Jason, but their digging machine is lost in the massive crevasse. They also find out that the samples that they have collected until now are on the other side of the crevasse. Jack jumps across the crack and retrieves the samples, barely making it across. They breathe a sigh of relief as they look with terror in their eyes at the depths of the crack that they almost fell into.
Northern Hemisphere owes its temperate climate to the Northern
A few years later, Jack is addressing the United Nations Global Warming Conference in New Delhi. Delegates from all over the world are present here. He warns the delegates about the excessive use of fossil fuels and the risk it poses to the environment. He warns them of the repercussions, like the melting of polar glaciers that could result in a rise in sea levels. He says that this could result in a new ice age as well. The Vice President of the US remarks that his suggestions would cost trillions of dollars, but they don't have enough money to execute such a huge change. Other leaders also feel the same sentiments, and hence, they don't take Jack seriously. At the conference, Jack meets Terry Rapson of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The two share similar views, and together discuss the repercussions in their respective fields. A few days later, the environmental repercussions start to appear. An unusual hailstorm in Japan causes destruction, when instead of small ice pellets, huge blocks of hail rain down on pedestrians. At Terry's monitoring station, they detect a massive drop in temperature of the ocean. In the International Space Station, astronauts note several massive storm formations all over the Earth. Terry's monitoring station sees the ocean's temperatures plummet even further. Meanwhile, Jack's son, Sam, is traveling to New York with his friends Laura and Brian for a quiz contest. While on the plane, they are hit by severe turbulence, but they land safely. On their way out of the airport, they see thousands of birds flying westward, making a huge noise. The sight is gloomy, and it looks like the birds are escaping something. Back at Terry's monitoring station, he notices further drops in the ocean's temperatures. He calls Jack and tells him that his predictions about glaciers melting in the North Atlantic are correct and are happening now.
These waves are even bigger than I imagined. Just take a look.
In Los Angeles, local news networks issue a tornado warning. The weather monitoring station is also informed about a hailstorm on the beach. Soon, multiple tornadoes form and decimate downtown Los Angeles. This catches people off guard, and panic and destruction quickly spreads amongst the people. The giant tornadoes dissipated as fast as they came, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. At the Pentagon's monitoring station, Jack and his colleagues try to figure out the situation. All areas throughout the Earth are experiencing the same destruction. Jack feels that the mid-Atlantic current could be the reason for the strange weather. He warns that the weather events will worsen. He builds a forecast model that predicts that the climate will radically change within 6 to 7 weeks. Sam and his friends are stuck at the quiz venue in New York. Jack tries to convince them to return, but they are unable to do so as all flights have been cancelled. Jack meets with and tries to warn the vice president, but the vice president feels that overreacting will affect American businesses, so he doesn't take Jack seriously. In Scotland, 3 British Air Force helicopters fly through the new weather formation. Suddenly, their instruments start freezing and the helicopter rotors freeze, resulting in all 3 choppers crashing. One of the soldiers survives and tries to flee, but he gets frozen the moment he opens the door. The subway tunnels are also flooded. Suddenly, a huge tsunami appears over the Statue of Liberty. It bashes through downtown Manhattan and destroys everything in its path. Jack and his friends flee to a library building with countless other civilians lucky enough to escape the storm surge. Terry gets in touch with Jack and tells him that the freezing air that brought down the helicopters is from the upper troposphere. Usually, this air would warm up as it descends, but the weather systems are causing the air to move down too fast, freezing everything on the surface. They also find out that the storm will be coming in a few hours, not in a few weeks. Jack shows the weather prediction, and 3 massive ice hurricanes are forming on the Earth, getting worse each day. Jack predicts that this storm will change the planet. Back in New York, Sam contacts his parents through a telephone line. Jack tells him he must stay inside and wait for the storm to pass, as it's only going to get worse. He also asks him to gather as much food and supplies as he can. Jack then decides to head to New York to get Sam. Jack then briefs the Pentagon about the situation. He warns them that the worst is yet to come. He suggests taking the whole population as far south as possible, as the ice formations are mostly in the Northern Hemisphere. He adds that people in the north are advised to hold out until the storms pass. The president decides to take Jack's advice and orders the National Guard to evacuate the remaining population to the south.
Everyone south of that line.
Meanwhile, Terry Rapson and his mates notice that their fuel has run out and soon they'll be left with no heating. They open a 12-year-old scotch and have a last drink as they wait to be frozen to death. In New York, a crowd of people are venturing on the frozen icescapes in hopes of reaching warmer states before the snow gets deeper. Sam tries to warn everyone that they won't survive the storm and they should all stay inside. But the crowd decides to leave. Only Sam and a handful of people are left in the library. Meanwhile, Jack sets off for Manhattan with Frank and Jason, his colleagues and friends. At the Mexican border, vast crowds of Americans are trying to cross into Mexico. It's a strange turnaround of events, as this time, the Americans are the ones crossing the border illegally. Jack and his crew run into a pileup of trucks when they're on the way to New York, and they have to make the rest of the way on foot. Being researchers stationed in the North Pole, Jack, Frank, and Jason are used to walking long distances in the cold. The men are walking on top of a collapsed glass building when suddenly the glass breaks and Frank falls in. He is hanging by their lifeline, but the glass is unable to sustain their weight. Jack tries to pull him up as Jason holds the weight, but Frank sees the glass cracking and decides to cut the line to save his friends, sacrificing himself. The situation is so severe that the president's convoy got stuck in the snow, resulting in his death. While Jack and Jason were making their way to New York, Jason collapsed from exhaustion, and Jack had to carry him. In the library, Laura gets a fever and falls unconscious. But the group tries to figure out what's happening to her, and discovers that she's potentially suffering blood poisoning from a wound infection. She needs an immediate injection of penicillin, or else her injuries could lead to amputation or death. Sam decides to head out to a nearby cargo ship that got washed in to look for medicine and food. Brian and another guy, JD, accompany him. Meanwhile, the images from the International Space Station reveal that there are two formations over Asia that are moving west fast. They will soon move into New York within a few hours and freeze everything. Sam, Brian, and JD enter the grounded cargo ship, unknowingly putting themselves in front of a hungry pack of wolves. They make their way to the ship's mess hall, and Brian finds penicillin. They're in the kitchen when the wolves come in and attack JD. Brian and Sam fight the wolves and save JD, but get stranded inside the mess hall. With JD's foot mangled, they must find a way back to the library soon. Sam sees the sky clearing and deduces that they're in the eye of the storm. So Sam plans to make his way outside and lure the wolves away from the mess hall. He runs through the ship, narrowly escaping the wolves, and heads back to the kitchen. Sam and Brian drag JD on an inflatable boat through the roads and into the library. They barely make it, seeing frost and ice descending from the sky. Meanwhile, Jack drags Jason with him and sees the sky clearing up and realizes they'll get caught in the eye. Knowing everything will freeze soon, he hurries to find an open vent and throws Jason inside before throwing himself in just as the ice descends. In New York, Sam, Brian, and JD scramble to get the fire up, throwing more books and wood in, desperately getting the room to warm up. Jack also lights a fire, as it is the only thing that can save him and Jason. When Jason wakes up, he sees ice all around him. Jack had managed to start a fire using an open stove. Seeing that Jason is okay, they set out again. At this point, they are 40 miles away from Manhattan. On their way, they had come across the corpses of people that had left the library in New York. None of them made it. Jack and Jason rest for a night, contemplating the future of humanity. Jack says humanity survived the last ice age, but if careless, might not survive this one. In the International Space Station, the astronauts are asked by ground control if they can confirm the storm is dissipating over North America. The astronauts confirm seeing landmass appear on the surface for the first time in days. Meanwhile, Jack steps out of their tent and sees a massive ship frozen in place. They start their trek again, walking past the Statue of Liberty that is completely covered under snow. The pair have finally reached the city and they can see the whole bay frozen and the city buried under several meters of snow. The Empire State Building is half covered by snow. They find the library, barely visible under the snow. and they make their way in through a window on the top floor. They walk through the hallways until they see a door that has light coming out from its bottom. They open the door and it turns out that it is the fireplace where Sam and the rest are sleeping with a burning fire keeping them alive. Jack and Sam are finally united. Sam hugs his father as the others look on with hope in their eyes. In Mexico, the head of NASA receives transmissions from Jack, informing him of survivors in New York. The vice president, who is now the president, addresses the nation, congratulating them for their tenacity and telling the country that survivors have been found in New York despite tremendous adversity. A search and rescue operation is underway to retrieve anyone stranded in the northern states. Helicopters finally reach Jack and the group, and they fly south. As they pass through Manhattan, they see more surviving pockets of populations on rooftops awaiting rescue. In the International Space Station, an astronaut looks down upon the changing planet, remarking the sky is the clearest he's ever seen. By the end, everyone is looking at their surroundings with a surreal sense of reality. Jack is happy to have found his son. Sam is happy that he didn't end up being dinner for wolves. The president is happy that his country survived, and climate activists are happy that the President of the United States has changed his mind and agreed to help save the planet. Everyone is happy except the wolves stuck in the ship, who have been hungry for all these days.